There's Rob.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. Mike Barnicle, John Heilman, and Elise Jordan are back on set. And joining us now from Capitol Hill, we have member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Republican Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska.
Senator.
Great to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning, and what's the uh-oh? Did I forget my Kavanaugh tattoo?
So, Senator, Mika has been saying nice things about you on Twitter.
That can't be true.
If you looked at snapshots overnight, your ratings are plummeting in Nebraska. She said nice things this morning, and a couple newspapers are suggesting that you resign now because you will not survive any Republican primary with the support of people like Mika and myself.
Mika, stop trying to help.
You don't know how many people say that to me.
No, seriously.
That was personal.
You don't. That cuts. Would you want to get your daughter's numbers?
No,
and you all can share that too.
She'll be mad at me.
Can I just ask you something? Because, Donald Trump has been attacking Alabama. And he's been saying that we're dumb, saying our school's second class. But, Senator, I don't ever remember the Crimson Tide canceling the game because of a shower.
Wow. Joe, you went there, didn't you? You did that.
Yeah, Nebraska canceling football games because of a rain shower?
There's a lot that's wrong right now, but I'm claiming dibs on the next segment because we can talk Kavanaugh later, but first we're going to trash talk football.
Yeah.
We're the winningest team of the last 50 years. Now,
really?
my wife regularly reminds me that Alabama might be the winningest team of the last 10.
Yeah.
I just want to say, too, I've been happily sleeping next to a University of Alabama alum who talks like she has marbles in her mouth most of the time for 2+ decades right now, and I'm a proud homer on this.
Do you call her a total idiot like Trump calls Sessions, or
usually she's calling me the total idiot?
So do you guys? Does she ever go down to? You guys ever go down to Tuscaloosa?
We've only been to one game since we've been married because usually there's a Nebraska game on most of those same weeks.
Oh.
She's going down this fall, and you guys are taking a bye week, so she's been weeping.
Wait. Okay. Women submit to your husbands? Is this what this is about, Ben Sasse?
No. She's been converted. She's been converted to the true eschatological football team.
That is just a lie.
That's funny.
That is a damned lie, and you know it. All right, so we'll go ahead and talk about Kavanaugh. I'll ask you the same question that we asked the senator from Hawaii, which is, can we ever look forward to a time after Merrick Garland and after, the Republicans killed the filibuster for the Supreme Court, after Harry Reid killed the filibuster for federal judges in general, can we ever look forward to a time when a president can appoint somebody who's qualified to sit on the Supreme Court and we can get 80 or 90 votes, not because it feels good, but because that's the way it's supposed to be, advise and consent?
Yeah, amen. So what we need to distinguish between basic civics and jurisprudence about what the purpose of the Supreme Court is, fits there, and policy fighting. We should fight about policy. A $15 minimum wage, a lot of people are in favor of it. I think it would have negative unintended consequences. Reasonable people should argue about that. They should fight about that. We shouldn't be having protests about the Supreme Court, and frankly, we shouldn't be having so much protest in front of the Supreme Court, which we've had now for 30 years, because it's become a substitute political body because the Congress doesn't do its politics right. And so we transfer so much power to the executive branch and to the judiciary because the Congress is impotent.
Senator Sasse, it's Willie Geist. I want to ask you about your willingness to criticize the president at times when you feel it's appropriate. A couple of days ago, when the president went on Twitter and questioned the Department of Justice over a couple of indictments of Republican congressmen, you came out and said this is not a banana republic. This is not how justice is carried out. The Justice Department effectively not there to protect the president of the United States. We haven't seen a lot of that, frankly, over the last couple of years, aside from senators who may be leaving town in a couple of months, and that is direct criticism of the President of the United States. And we've heard publicly and privately from Republicans who say it's just not good politics at this point to cross President Trump because he's popular in my district or he's popular in my state. What's your view of that?
Yeah, I didn't run for office for short-term popularity. I ran for office because I'm worried about the long-term health of our country. And a lot of times people say, and Twitter is swallowing so much of our news right now, people say, oh, well, this or that is just talk. Well, actually, why you want talk and why you want debate is because those norms are what keep us from violence. And so the things that the president said on Sunday, attacking the Justice Department and asking for politicized justice, that's really, really dangerous stuff, because in our country, we believe that justice is blind. I came here because I want to drain the swamp. I don't care whether the congressman who's doing insider trading or embezzling campaign funds or is indicted for this or that. I don't care whether they wear a blue or a red jersey. I want fewer of those people around. And it seems to me if you want swamp draining, you don't want two tiers of justice for the majority party and the minority party. I want people who work at the Department of Justice to believe in the rule of law.
So, Senator, why do you think it's been so difficult for your Republican colleagues, both in the Senate and the House, to do what you do almost every time you see a norm being violated or a line being crossed, and that is to criticize the president?
I'm not really sure why a lot of people around here make a lot of their decisions, but I think most people in both parties right now, their main long-term interest in Washington is their own incumbency. And that's not really what I'm that interested in. I'm worried about the future of cyber. I'm worried about the future of work. I'm worried about the collapse of social capital as the digital revolution undermines local community. Most of the stuff I care about isn't right versus left. It's past versus future. I'm the second or third most conservative person in the Senate by voting record, and I don't hide any of that. But most of what I care about isn't stuff that we're actually debating in the Congress. So I'm not really that interested in incumbency. I'm worried about the country my kids are going to grow up in 10 or 15 years from now. And so when something's true and it's big and it's important, and frankly, what the president did on Sunday was big and true and dangerous, I'm going to speak about that because that's actually why I ran for office, not chiefly because of Republican versus Democrat stuff.
So, Senator, let's talk about Republican versus Democratic stuff. Obviously, sort of the ghost of Merrick Garland's nomination is hanging over Brett Kavanaugh's hearing, fairly or unfairly, depending on what tribe member is writing.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think that's fair? Secondly, did Republicans make a mistake not giving Merrick Garland a chance to talk in their offices and to talk in front of the Judiciary Committee and at least get an up or down vote?
So I think here we get to a place where it becomes Hatfields and McCoys really quickly, right? So I want to acknowledge that this works better if we have an hour and a bunch of beer. But you can always go back to the prior sin, to the prior sin, to the prior sin. But where we really are right now is there has been a tradition going back to World War II that people are not confirmed to the Supreme Court in a presidential election year. That's just been the tradition. And that really comes most fundamentally, even though it's a tradition going back to 1945, it comes most directly from the mid to late 1980s, when every Supreme Court nomination since has been politicized. Going back to the Bork hearings in 1987, we have a situation where you can predict the craziness that was going to happen here yesterday. The lunacy of the way we do protests at these hearings is because people think these are made-for-TV events to scream in a tribal way. I think we should be doing a lot more of what Kavanaugh said yesterday, which is noting, as his opening statement did, it's going to be swallowed by other news. I get that. But he noted something really important, which is that the Supreme Court has no aisle. There's not a right and a left side of the court. There aren't caucus rooms where you meet as the red team justices and the blue team justices. Kavanaugh talked about a team of 9, and I think we need to get back to a place where our kids and basic American civics understands why you put on a robe in the morning when you're a judge. And that's because it's a modest role. It's not to be pro-environment or pro-coal. It's not to be pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. It's to be pro-rule of law. And you put on a black judge to cloak all of those prior policy preferences because it's a unique role to be a judge. And we need a team of 9 where we don't see them as Republican or Democratic justices.
Hey, Senator, listening to you and you know, you clearly just expressed that you're worried about the long-term future of the country. You're worried about the short-term future of the country. Change is sweeping this country right now. It's obvious in the headlines that we read each and every day. Yesterday in Massachusetts in the Democratic primary, Mike Capuano, 20-year veteran of the House, lost to a young city councilor from Boston, Ayanna Pressley. One of her themes was change can't wait. And as voters look at you and every other candidate on the ballot, I'm wondering about the issue of term limits. Do you believe in term limits?
Heck yeah, it's the first piece of legislation I introduced the first day I was here. January 3rd or 4th, 2015, I went and introduced a constitutional amendment for term limits. Promptly got called to the principal's office about 2 hours later because it was viewed as criticism of all the incumbents. But if I could pull a lever that fired all 535 people, including myself, I'd do it in a heartbeat. We need change, but the real question is change toward what? Because all that's really happening right now in American politics, and this has been a decade and a half in the coming, obviously the president injects a new kind of chaos directly into the veins of America. But this isn't really 2016 to the present stuff. We've been heading here for a couple of decades. All that really happens every election is you try to figure out how you can mobilize more intensity to be against. And so we just go yin and yang, screaming against whoever the party is that's in power, because nobody around here in either of these parties really has a long-term vision for the country we're entering. And the reality is our kids, I'm a former college president, so I think a lot about the world from the perspective of 18-year-old or 22-year-old kids heading out into the world. They're going to change jobs 3 times in the next decade. There isn't going to be lifelong employment anymore. McKinsey has a whole bunch of interesting studies about what digital disruption is going to do in terms of creating a freelance economy where everybody's mostly doing side hustles. We need to rethink the social compact for age 35 and 40 and 45 and 50 if your industries are going to cease to exist. All of that stuff is big and we need change, but we actually need a whole bunch of long-term policy thinking, and neither of these parties are talking about any of that. They're talking about how they can scream that the other people are bigger devils than we are. It's not good enough.
So, Senator, we have somebody else from the Deep South that talks probably like your wife.
Major marbles.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Elise,
I've never called her that, and I think I'm not going to start.
marbles in the mouth, as Donald Trump would say. Elise Jordan from what part of Mississippi?
Holly Springs, Mississippi.
From Holly Springs, Mississippi.
No, I apologize for talking slow and funny. Senator Sass, this is actually kind of a complicated question. Because I honestly don't know the answer to it, but you were talking about how Congress has ceded all of their power to the executive. It's part of the problem with this politicized Supreme Court confirmation process. You're talking about how Congress isn't debating issues that are actually affecting the future of Americans, such as social capital and digital and cyber and a host of other things. What can be done as someone who is in the Senate to actually help the Senate work on issues that affect Americans instead of this politicization of literally everything that they touch?
Yeah, so I mean, one basic thing we should do is we should actually have a budget and appropriation process that's real, not fake. There was a rework of the law that governs the budgeting process in 1974, and it worked for about 4 years. But in the 40 years since then, Congress has only passed at least a budget that spends at least 30% of the public's money on a regular order budget 4 times in the last 39 years. And so with a fiscal year that ends September 30th, one thing we can do from the Congress is have a real budgeting process that tells the truth about entitlements, because that's where all of our money's actually going. The public thinks it's a wasteful bill here, or it's some inefficient thing there, or it's the food stamps program, or it's the military. It's really long-term entitlements, chiefly around retirement, as life expectancy is going to grow. So that's something that should come from Congress. But I want to tell you the truth, that really we're not going to fix this stuff without presidential leadership to help focus the country's vision and the country's attention on what those challenges are. And so I think the next 2 or 3 presidential elections are really going to be critical to having the public understand why the Congress doesn't do its job. And right now what happens is almost every bill that's passed here is 1,000 pages long, and it's got 300 or 500 undefined terms, and you punt it to an executive branch agency that is supposed to define those terms and finish the law, really. It's supposedly regulations, but it's really law writing inside the executive branch. Only a president can help the American people understand that. And right now we don't do our campaigns about anything big. We just do them about screaming, and it's why we have to do better.
All right, Ben Sasse, thank you so much for being with us. Ben, of course, from the state that hasn't won a national championship
Oh,
since.
come on.
Whoa. I'm not ready to leave yet. I'm here to
He's not
object.
going.
What was it? What
Sasse.
was it? 1997? Was it 1997?
So
Willie?
in the
Tommy Frazier
mid-90s,
era, yeah.
we went. Yeah, that's right. We went 62-3, and Scott Frost, our
Yeah.
new coach,
Yep.
by the way, was
Yeah.
our last national championship quarterback. But we went 62-3 over 5 years. So
Yeah.
we should talk about football again.
Yeah, I think I think also during that time period, people were still listening to the Bee Gees on 8-track.
Wow.
So
That was just you, Joe.
it's been a lot. I still am,
Wow.
Senator. I still am. I'll tell you what.
Wasn't Andy Gibb one of the Bee Gees?
No, that was the brother that passed away. Mika's got this Andy Gibb fixation,
He wasn't one of the
Senator.
Bee Gees?
I'm like concerned about it.
Oh, no.
No?
So you know what? We can
He's
ask
one of the
him this
brothers
question.
of the brothers who
So
were in
we
the
had
Bee Gees.
we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and they've told us that you had to leave, but you wanted to stay there. But we've talked about our musical guilty pleasures. Mika said Andy Gibb. Willie was
Shadow
trying to
dancing.
be too cool and said Dave Matthews Band as if that's a guilty pleasure. Do you have
They're
a guilty
haters.
pleasure?
That's just disgusting.
Love and Spoonful.
Again, John Sebastian and Love and Spoonful, not a guilty pleasure. Like the Carpenters, that's a guilty pleasure that will, your guilty pleasure?
Twisted
Has to
Sister,
clear.
man.
What's that?
Twisted Sister?
Yes. My 7-year-old and I went snake hunting last weekend, and we listened to "We're Not Going to Take It" 63 straight times.
Oh, my Lord.
I
I
like
don't really
Twisted
understand how that
Sister. I like
qualifies as a
that song.
pleasure of any kind.
That's a good song.
That's like Joey and
Okay, let 'em
Andrew
go.
forcing
Ben
me
says bye. Thank
to
you.
play Limp Bizkit
Thank you
Nookie
very
1,000
much.
times. Thank you, Senator. It's always great seeing you.
Andy
Say
Gibb
Limp
was a Bee
Bizkit?
Gee.
Do you remember Limp
Of
Bizkit?
course I do.
So somebody,
No.
yeah, Nookie.
Robin Gibb, Maurice Gibb, Barry Gibb.
Barry.
All
No, Andy
they were the
Gibb?
Bee Gees.
Right.
Andy was the younger brother who was the solo artist who then died of a
Are you
drug
proud you know
overdose.
this all? Yeah.
Well, he-
Okay.
a lot-
You were just talking about guilty pleasures, all right? Okay, so I'm guilty.
Andy
I
Gibb
thought it
had-
was a
had-
Bee Gee.
brother of a lot of hits though.
Andy Gibb,
Packed him up.
as did the Bee Gees.
They did.
All right,
lot of
up
hits.
next, MSNBC.
Wait, he just said his guilty pleasure.
Twisted Sister.
Twisted Sister.
He went full hairband.
He
Dee
did.
Snyder. That's a great video, too, by the way. If you go
Oh
on
my
YouTube
God,
today,
so good.
Great video.
So good.
MSNBC chief legal correspondent Ari Melber joins us next. We'll get his analysis on today's Supreme Court hearings ahead. Plus, we'll dig into the other legal issues swirling around the president, from the latest in the Mueller probe and the president's new tweet about libel laws after the fallout from Bob Woodward's new book. Keep it right here on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.